Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to present here. I'm very excited to be here. That's the first time at the Photonics conference. My name is Dempewolf. I actually wear two hats. I'm assistant research professor at the University of Maryland, and I'm also co-owner of a company in Germany. I live in Germany since a few years. I've lived a very long time in the United States before. To give a brief background, so actually, we also work very closely with the University of Applied Forest Sciences in Rottenburg. So we have this very close collaboration and integration between our applied work that we do within the small company that we have and the university, the research world. Just to give a brief background about the company, so originally this is a forest service company, forest harvesting, forest maintenance, planting operations, and things like that. And I have been working with them and joined the company very recently to shift the focus more on other services like forest inventory, forest planning, forest appraisal, and also GIS and remote sensing techniques. So I'm going to actually cover a number of different topics today that we're looking at. So one of the main things is tree height growth measurements with drones. But then I will also cover a couple other things to show what kind of challenges we have and what kind of applications we are developing. One of the things we quickly realized, and most of you know, is that many of those technologies, there is demand, but the market is not developed. So you develop the product and work with the customers, but at the same time, the demand is only coming slowly because the customer doesn't really know what is possible. So the measurement of within season tree height growth using drones, so what we did was we wanted to know, is it possible to measure tree height growth within one growing season with low-cost equipment. So usually the first technology that would come to mind is probably LiDAR, and that would certainly work, but these instruments are very expensive. We heard today the Regal LiDAR, I think, is 200,000 euros. There are lower cost instruments also available by now, but we wanted to test this with the optical drones that are also that can also be used by normal forestry companies, even themselves. So use the Phantom 3 drone. So we did this in a forest close to in southern Germany, where we are based, close to Stuttgart in this area. And we produced a time series. One of the challenges with working with time series is to make those match. So we used for that to make the individual acquisitions match spatially. So we used for those ground control plates. So that adds additional work. We're actually looking now into technology to use RTK and PPK drones. So these are drones that have a higher accuracy, use differential GPS. They're also quite coming down in cost now, then this is eliminated. So we calculated the the point clouds. It's a normal step in working with optical drone data, calculated the digital elevation model, and did this throughout the year. So we assessed them, then we compared them these different height models for 4 different tree species. So for spruce, we put them together because they're difficult to distinguish for pine trees, for birch trees, and for beech trees. And the results were quite encouraging. So we actually were able, with this simple technology, to get very realistic values. So in this case, for example, spruce fir, they grew by 75 centimeters on average, the pines by 87, and we measured some of those trees also individually from the ground for a comparison. So this is an example that this kind of technology can be used to, for example, to calibrate forest growth models. But our next step is to refine this technology, as I mentioned, with differential GPS drones and use it for forest inventory measurements. So there is a market for that available, also research interest, of course. In Germany, we are lucky that we have LiDAR coverage for the entire country, I believe, for sure, for the state of Baden-Württemberg and Bayern, where we work. And that gives us the ground. That gives us very good ground measurements. And if you combine that then with optical measurements of the tree height, that we can use this for forest inventory purposes. This is also the high growth with the early growing season and the late growing season. We were able to distinguish that. That's also realistic. And this shows the different growth rates for small trees and larger trees. So small trees grow faster because they're younger. In this case, it's not a plantation. The trees have different ages, and that's also realistic. So we published this work as well. This is something I wanted to mention, something we came across, the lighting conditions. This is important also when you work as a company and you check the weather conditions and everything looks fine, no rain. But then the lighting conditions can still create problems. So in this case, if it's consistently sunny or consistently cloudy, the top ones are sunny, the bottom ones are cloudy, it's fine. But when you have lighting conditions that are changing during the flight, then the results are disastrous. So this is something I wanted to mention. There's also a challenge by working with optical data when you have to plan ahead. So this is the same forest patch with no light change, and the results were very good. Another thing is creating an orthophoto mosaic or a digital surface model from a tree stand. Anybody can do that. So the technology is now advanced enough that anybody who can buy a drone, even without much education or background research, can actually produce that. There are also many companies that do that. They work in other areas, for example, construction sites. They can do that, but the key is to produce a value-added product. And one of the value-added products we are looking into right now is to calculate the sunlight hours on the forest floor. And this is an interesting application because in this case, the left forest plot is a so-called plantoforest. It's a specific kind of forest management where you have all trees ages in the same forest plot. And the right one, the same kind of forest right next to it, was harvested, and both were sold. And the company, actually it's a local administration who bought that. They wanted to know what they actually bought. So they came actually a bit late to us. So we did a characterization for them, and right now, so we noticed by going to the field that the regeneration is very different because the light conditions have changed in the right. Tall trees have been taken out. It's much more sunnier on the ground, and there's more spruce coming up, and the shade-tolerant fir trees are not coming up. So this has been over-harvested, you could say. It has been mismanaged in a way. And so right now we are working on being able to show that to model the lighting conditions on the ground, and then give them an assessment of how this forest has been managed. Another application for that is red list species. So in Germany, the forest policy during the last decades have been no clear cuts and only closed forests. So it's actually very difficult to get a permission to do any kind of clear cut. As a consequence, many species who were adapted to open forests have disappeared slowly and are now on the red list. So for conservation applications, this is also very interesting because some of the butterflies, for example, they require a certain number of sunlight hours, in order to survive. So this is an application that we can use for restoration of these kind of open forests to actually quantify how are the light conditions on the ground, and are they suitable for specific red list species that should be protected, or that are supposed to be protected in a certain project. So this is another thing that we'll be able to offer soon. Then I wanted to show one example that we recently worked on, tree crown health using the Normalized Difference Weightage Index. So we work with the Mikason's camera that has also been mentioned before. It's a multispectral camera that has the near-infrared and also the red edge band. And this is a forest stand, it's a spruce and fir mixed stand that has been, where many of the trees have been gradually dying off. So almost every year you have to take out some trees. And it's not quite clear why. So it's not a specific reason that the forest even was able to pinpoint. But here you can actually see a pointer. Well, the red tree in the center is clearly dead, as you can see. This is the Normalized Difference Vegetation Index calculated from our drone imagery. This is by far the most used standard vegetation index. So this is, and as you might expect, the tree has comparatively very low NDVI value. That's what you expect. Now, when you calculate the normalized difference red edge index, so this is using the red edge band instead of the near-infrared band, or in addition to, instead of the red band, we notice that the tree next to it is actually looks very similar to the one that's already dead. And when you look at the numbers, so this is scaled from 0 to 100, and actually the definition of the normalized difference red edge index is incorrect. It's near-infrared minus red edge divided by near-infrared minus red edge. I apologize for that. But when you look at those numbers, then that a green tree next to it has a very low number and looks already as dead as the one that's still that has already died. So we visited that with the forester, and when he looked at that tree, he also agreed, yeah, it actually at closer inspection it's already losing leaves, and sure enough, 6 weeks later this happened. This tree was also dead. So what I want to show with this is, with this index, and that has also been found in the literature before, I should say, with the multispectral camera, with the red edge band, you can actually detect tree damage up to 6 weeks before the tree actually dies. So this is important for example, applicable for bark beetle forecasting, but there's also been quite a bit of research done recently, not only recently, since a long time, for forecasting bark beetle, and that's also something we're looking into it. But the results so far, almost across the board, have been that you can determine damaged trees, but the reason for it is another story. So this could be bark beetle. It's not, because we checked on the ground. But it can be, so it can have a number of other reasons as well. Still the foresters are still interested in, of course, having an assessment of which trees is actually sick. One of the restrictions in Germany is that beyond visual line of sight applications or permissions are very difficult to get. So far, I'm not sure. I think I'm not sure even one forestry company has got a permission for that. I know there's a power line inspection company. I think they have gotten permission now, but that's a restriction still. Okay, and the last thing I want to mention, we're also working on talking about value-adding tree planting campaigns. So in Germany, there's not a huge amount of tree planting going on, but many forest operations, they do plant limited areas. And what usually happens is that a forester prepares the area. Then he goes out with, sometimes with an aerial photograph, but that's usually outdated. That's not accurate anymore, what's on the ground. And then he measures kind of, how many trees should he order from the nursery, orders those, and then start planting. And a lot of the times, those numbers are just inaccurate because they're just estimates. So if they don't order enough, then they can order more. That's not a problem. If they order too many, and it happens up to 25, 30% too many, that happens frequently, then that's a financial loss. And so with drones, the forester, we can measure the area for him, but it's expensive. Actually, the forester can do it themselves. And that's another thing we're also working on, actually, to educate foresters how they can use their own drones. So this is not a project we actually just submitted a proposal for with the university in Rottenburg. But what we can do then is to provide a value-added product. So in this case, we also did measurements of soil depth, and we analyzed the digital surface model. So it gives us an idea about quality and about suitability of which tree species goes where better or should be planted, and the forester can use this information to make a better decision about what to plant, and then he can order the exact amount that's needed. Yes, so this was my last slide. Thank you for your attention.
I had a stupid question, but I had an answer already. So, do you use already in Germany this data for predicting diseases or dying trees from the forestry in practical scale?
Yeah, so there are a number of research institutions. So we also have close contacts with the Forest Research Institute in Freiburg, which is the research institute for Baden-Württemberg for our state. and they have been doing a study last year in the Black Forest, and actually worked with, I think, 3 or 4 different companies who were doing this kind of forecasting. So we did not participate in this project. It was a bit too early for us. But the outcome of that was, as I already mentioned, that there were a number of challenges. So the forecast was not early enough. It didn't pinpoint that it was bark beetle. It was sometimes something else. Sometimes it missed it completely. And another challenge is, even if you identify a tree that has a problem in the forest, how do you find it again? So that also turned out to be a big challenge, because the accuracy, they did it without differential GPS. So that already had an inaccuracy, the orthomosaic, for about 10 meters or more, 15 meters. But then when you go in the forest and try to find the tree on the ground, that's another challenge, because if you go there, as you probably know, with the GPS under the forest canopy, that itself has an inaccuracy of at least 10, 20, or 30 meters.
So what kind of technology is needed for you that you can get even more better solution your customers? So what kind of technology is needed?
Yes. So in terms of, so many of those applications that I showed are smaller applications that will work, I think, in the future, some of them, but they might not be hugely profitable. I think if for the forest areas, the most important, the most marketable product would be forest inventory, and especially the assessment of standing biomass or standing wood biomass to harvest. And for that, I think 2 technologies are key. One is, as I already mentioned, higher precise optical data with using differential GPS, and the other, of course, LiDAR. So, and these costs are starting to come down. I think 2 years ago they were still 60, 70, 80,000 euros, but now they have apparently come down the sensor to like maybe 15 euros, but then you need additional software and others, so it still adds up. But I think this is going to come down in the future, and then that will be very interesting.